All right. Boy, it's good to be home. Appreciate it so much. It's just nice. It's so nice to sleep in my own bed, use my own shower, wear my own microphone. You know, you kind of get attached to these things, and over the years, there's lots of different kinds. And they had one for me up in Colorado, and I like to wear mine on my belt like that. Some are stick it in the pocket. Boy, I don't do well with that. I like it on the belt right there where I can get to it. They had this one up in Colorado. Every time I slid that thing on my belt, it'd fall apart. The clip came off, and so I'm standing there right before I'm getting ready to get up. I'm trying to get the clip back on there so I can get it on my belt. I did that every time I spoke. It was pretty frustrating, but it is good to be back and to stand in the pulpit here and to see you especially. That's what makes it greatest of all. I was able to bring my mother back with me, so if you would like to meet and talk to the woman who gave birth to me 60 years ago, 10 pounds, 11 ounces, natural birth, you may want to talk to her about how she did that. That's quite an accomplishment compared to this day and age. Always a pleasure to have her with us. And I am also going to say something about Chase's anniversary. Oh, so great to have him here. And we were talking about that this morning. It's been 2 years. Yesterday marked 2 years that he has been serving the church here. And we are just grateful to God to have him. But nothing was as special as when he married Sadie. Then that made it really special. Now we really love having him here. He is twice the man he was because of her. Oh. We're going to talk about this morning, do you know who you are? And maybe that sounds like a silly question to you. Maybe you're sitting there saying, well, of course I know who I am. But people that we introduce ourselves to all the time, right? You meet somebody new and they want to know who you are, and you have some quick way that you introduce yourself. But what if somebody, a complete stranger, came up and go ahead and go to the next slide here and asked this question of you? Who are you? What comes to mind when you think about who are you? What defines who you are? You know, in your notes, and I encourage you to get out the notes, they're in the bulletin. And it should say, right, and there's 2 pages. It's the one that says, do you know who you are? And then right underneath that, it says Curtis Hartshorn. That's not the answer to the question who you are, by the way. Not your answer, anyway. And you can find Genesis chapter 27. We'll be there in a moment. But, you know, as I think about who I am as a person, and this last trip, being able to go back to my hometown, see the actual place I was born, see the house that I grew up in, makes you really think a lot about who are you really, and what defines who you are as a person. We're going to look at 3 people in the Bible. But before we look at them, I want you to know, and I want you to think about, these are real people. You know, the Bible is not a fairy tale book. We're going to read about Jacob. Jacob was a real person, a real live bona fide person that walked this earth. An entire nation is named after him. His other name was Israel, if you did not know. He's a real person. We're going to look at Moses. Moses is a real human being that walked this earth. Gideon, a real human being who walked this earth, who struggled with a lot of the same things that you and I do. All of us have this identity crisis. We all have to figure out, as life goes by, who we really are. So let's start with Jacob here. Point A, Jacob had to find out who he was. This ordinary man came into the earth. He was a twin, born with his brother Esau. And this man had to find out who he was. But as he grew up, number one, Jacob pretended to be Esau to steal his birthright. We're fairly familiar with the story, but let's read how it all gets started. In Genesis chapter 27, verse 1 says, "Now it came about that when Isaac was old," let me stop there and define what old is. What is old? We use that term loosely, but if you back up to chapter 25 for just a second here, look back at 25 and verse 26. It says, "Afterward his brother came forth," this is describing the birth of the twins, "with his hand holding on to Esau's heel, so his name was called Jacob. And Isaac was 60 years old when she gave birth to them." So keep that in mind. Isaac was 60 years old when they gave birth to the twins. Now go to chapter 26 and verse 34. It says, "When Esau was 40 years old, he married Judith, the daughter of Beeri the Hittite, and Basemath, the daughter of Elon the Hittite, and they brought grief to Isaac and Rebekah." So he is 60 years old when his twins are born, and one of the twins is now 40 years old. Do the math. He's at least 100 years old when this event happens in chapter 27. Now it came about when Isaac was old, and his eyes were too dim to see, that he called his older son Esau, and he said to him, "My son." And he said to him, "Here I am." Isaac said, "Behold now, I am old. I do not know the day of my death. Now then, please take your gear, your quiver and your bow, and go out into the field and hunt game for me, and prepare a savory dish for me, such as I love, and bring it to me that I may eat, so that my soul may bless you before I die." So we see the plan here. Isaac says, "I don't know how much longer I'm going to live. I'm getting tired of this old world. I'm going to depart sometime. I want you to go get some game, go hunt, bring the game back, prepare that for me. I have a blessing that I want to give you, Esau." Now that was the plan. But the next verse, verse 5, says that Rebekah was listening. Now Rebekah is Isaac's wife. She's listening. Let me tell you what that really means. She was eavesdropping. That's what she was doing. She wasn't young herself, all right? She's nosy. And she overhears his plan. So she comes up with a scheme of her own. We learned 2 chapters before this that Isaac, he favored Esau. He liked Esau better. But Rebekah favored Jacob. That was her favorite. And when you start playing favorites with the kids, parents, you're going to have problems. So Rebekah, she likes Jacob, so she hatches this plan. It's her plan. What we'll do is she gets Jacob and says, "What I want you to do is go get a goat and let's kill it, and we'll cook it up. I'll cook it, and I want you to take the goat skin and put it on your arms and put it on the back of your neck, and I want you to go put it on Esau's clothes, and I want you to pretend to be Esau so you can get the blessing." That's the plan. Not a good plan. We read in verse 18, and this is point number 2, we see that he lied to his own father about who he was. Verse 18 says, "Then he came up to his father and he said, 'My father?' And he said, 'Here I am.' 'Who are you, my son?'" Notice the question. "Who are you?" Verse 19, "Jacob said to his father, 'I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me. Get up, please sit, and eat of my game, that you may bless me.' And Isaac said to his son, 'How is it that you have so quickly, my son?' And he said, 'Well, because the Lord your God caused it to happen to me.' And then Isaac said to Jacob, 'Please come close that I may feel you, my son, whether you are really my son Esau or not.'" See, he has some doubts, doesn't he? Verse 22, "So Jacob came close to Isaac his father, and he felt him, and he said, 'The voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau.' He did not recognize him because his hands were hairy, like his brother Esau's hands. And so he blessed him. Verse 24 said, and he said, are you really my son Esau? And he said, I am. You notice how many times there Jacob had the opportunity to come clean, and he did not do it. He asked him, who are you? Oh, I'm Esau. No, he wasn't. He said, well, come close, I can check you out. I want to make sure that you really are Esau. He could have come clean then. And then even before he gives him the blessing, he asked him one more time, are you really my son Esau? Jacob he's a snake. He's a conniver here. Jacob didn't know who he was. He's trying to pretend to be somebody that he really is not. He lied to his own father about who he was. Can you relate? Sometimes we live a lie. Sometimes we're trying to be somebody that we're really not, because we want somebody else's blessing. We want something that somebody else has. We think, well, if I'm like that person, then I'll get what they have. And so we disguise ourselves. We become somebody that we're really not. I think it's rather interesting, point 3, that God asked Jacob who he was. Look at chapter 32. It's a little later on in the story of the life of Jacob. Jacob actually finds himself wrestling with God, a physical wrestle, which is, I know it's mind-boggling to think about this, but it says in verse 24, then Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. Now, I know it says a man, but we're going to find out that through the process of this, he changes his name from Jacob to Israel, and Israel means he who wrestles with God. So it actually is God that he is wrestling with. Verse 25, and when he saw that he had not prevailed against him, he touched the socket of his thigh, so the socket of Jacob's thigh was dislocated while he wrestled with him. And he said, let me go, for the dawn is breaking. But he said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. Typical Jacob, still looking for blessings, isn't he? He's already stole his brothers. And verse 27, and he said to him, what is your name? And he said, Jacob. Is that not strange that God would ask Jacob what his name is? Now I'll give you a little clue about Bible study. Anytime you're studying the Bible, when God asks a person a question, it's not because he doesn't know the answer. That never happens. It's always because he's trying to get the other person to think about the answer. And he comes to Jacob, he says, Jacob, what is your name? I'm just wondering what your name is. Because a couple of chapters before this, you seemed to be a little confused about who you were. What's your name? Jacob, do you really know who you are? Oh, Jacob had to learn. He had to figure it out. He had to find out for sure who he was. Let's look at another example like this. Let's look at Moses. Moses had to find out who he was. And point number 1, Moses, that's what goes in your first blank there. Moses first had to discover where he came from. Let's go to the book of Exodus. One more book to the right there. Chapter 2. Oh, how do I set this up for you? Moses was born a Hebrew slave. But the Hebrew baby boys were being killed to prevent their population from growing. And so his mother took him and hid him in a ark, it's called, a small boat, and set him afloat on the river Nile. And Pharaoh's daughter discovers him and raises Moses as her own. I think you know most of that story, but that's just the kind of the peripheral idea here, so we'll understand what's going on. Let's jump into chapter 2, verse 9. It says, then Pharaoh's daughter said to her, take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages. And so the woman took the child and nursed him. The child grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she named him Moses, for she said, because I drew him out of the water. Now it came about in those days when Moses had grown up that he went out to his brethren. Notice that. He went out to his brethren and looked on their hard labors, and he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his brethren. And so he looked this way and that, and when he saw that there was no one around, he struck down the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. And he went out the next day, and behold, 2 Hebrews were fighting with each other. And he said to the offender, why are you striking your companion? They said, who made you a prince or judge over us? Are you intending to kill me as you killed the Egyptian? And then Moses was afraid and said, surely the matter has become known. Moses was raised as an Egyptian. But somewhere along the line, somehow he found out he wasn't an Egyptian after all. He was Hebrew. And so when he looked out and he saw his people, his brethren, fellow Hebrews being abused by this Egyptian slave master, he killed him, hid him in the sand. Moses had to discover who he was. Number 2, part of Moses was included in where he had been, where he had come from. We see after he runs away, he escapes. Verse 15 says, when Pharaoh heard of this matter, he tried to kill Moses, but Moses fled from the presence of Pharaoh, settled in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came to draw water and filled the troughs to water their father's flocks. Then the shepherds came and drove them away. But Moses stood up and helped them and watered their flock. And when they came to Reuel, their father, he said, why have you come back so soon today? And they said, an Egyptian, notice this, an Egyptian delivered us from the hand of the shepherds. And what is more, he even drew the water for us and watered the flock. He said to his daughters, where is he then? Why is it that you have left the man behind? Invite him to have something to eat. And Moses was willing to dwell with the man, and he gave him his daughter Zipporah to Moses. And then she gave birth to a son, and he named him Gershom. For he said, I have been a sojourner in a foreign land. Notice what we're reading here, people. We're reading an ordinary guy, Moses, who's trying to figure out who he is. When he rescues these 7 daughters and allows them to water their flocks, you notice they say an Egyptian rescued us, but he wasn't an Egyptian at all. Why did they think he was Egyptian? I don't know. Maybe his clothing, maybe his appearance, his bearing. Something about him said Egyptian, but he wasn't Egyptian. He was a Hebrew. Number 3, Moses needed God to show him his true identity. In chapter 3 of Exodus, look at verse 10. Now this is after God has appeared to Moses in the burning bush. He says, therefore come now, and I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the sons of Israel, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, who am I, that I should go to Pharaoh, and that I should bring the sons of Israel out of Egypt? And he said, certainly I will be with you, and this shall be the sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall worship God at this mountain. When he is told by God, you're going to be the one, Moses, you're going to be the one that are going to deliver your people out of the hands of the Egyptians, his response was, who am I? Moses didn't know who he was. And he didn't figure it out till he was 80 years old. Think about that. It took him a lifetime to figure out who he was. But he soon discovered who he was. Let's look at one more example. I think you've got the point here already, and you could do this with any character in the Bible. But let's look at Gideon. Gideon had to find out who he was. We see in number 1 that Gideon was in trouble, and he thought he had no way out. In the book of Judges, chapter 6, Judges chapter 6, beginning in verse 11. Then the angel of the Lord came and sat under the oak that was in Ophrah, which belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, as his son Gideon was beating out wheat in the winepress in order to save it from the Midianites. Now, when you go to beat out wheat, and what you're doing, you're trying to get all the flux off of it so you can save the seed and so you can preserve the wheat. You don't do that in the wine press. The wine press is not designed for that. But you know why he's doing it in the wine press? Because he is a scared rabbit. That's why. He is scared of the Midianites. And so he's hiding out there in the wine press, and he is trying to get this wheat out so he can go hide it somewhere so the Midianites don't get it. That's the scene. That's Gideon. That's who he thinks he is. This is my job. I just got to protect this. I just got to try to do the best I can. I got this big problem with these Midianites, but I'm just going to do what I can to protect myself. Look at verse 12. The angel of the Lord appeared to him and said to him, "The Lord is with you, O valiant warrior." Oh, valiant warrior? Don't you know that when he said that, Gideon did one of these? Who? Oh, valiant warrior. Yeah, right. Gideon saying, not me. Verse 13, then Gideon said to him, "Oh, my Lord, if the Lord is with us, why then has all this happened to us? And where are all these miracles which our father told us about, saying, did not the Lord bring us up from Egypt? But now the Lord has abandoned us. He's given us into the hand of Midian." And the Lord looked at him and said, "Go in your strength, this your strength, and deliver Israel from the hand of Midian. Have I not sent you?" And he said to him, "Oh, Lord." Now, I don't know how he said that. If he said, "Oh, Lord," or "Oh, Lord." I'm not sure how he said this, but how shall I deliver Israel? Behold, my family is the least in Manasseh, and I'm the youngest in my father's house. But the Lord said to him, get this, "Surely I will be with you." Is not the same thing he told Moses just a little bit ago? I will be with you, and you shall defeat Midian as one man. Gideon had a problem. He was in trouble, and he saw no way out. And so when the Lord appeared to him, he spilled the beans, all these complaints. God, He's not with us. He promised all these miracles. I've heard about all this stuff, but He's obviously abandoned us to the Midianites. We got this problem, and we don't have a solution. And God looks at Gideon and says, "I have wonderful news. You're the solution." Isn't that great? Gideon's like, "Really? Me? I'm from the least of the tribes, the tribe of Manasseh. I am the youngest in my family. Who am I? Who am I?" God had to show him who he was. Number 2, Gideon was wrong about his place in life. He was wrong about who he was. He didn't understand until God showed him. Number 3, God knew all along the potential that Gideon had. But Gideon did not know it. Next on the screen here, I want to show you a movie that you may be familiar with. It's called Overcomer. It's a great movie. It was done in 2019. It is done by the Kendrick brothers. They've done several movies like Fireproof, Courageous. They put out some pretty good stuff. This movie was projected to do $6 million in box office takings. It actually did $38 million. It was just a highly successful movie. But as you can see by the title there in a second, what do you allow to define you? The movie is about the guy here on the right who is a coach. He's a basketball coach. And he introduces himself as the basketball coach. That's who he thinks he is. That got stripped away from him by circumstances. His identity, who he thought he was taken away. And the whole movie is about really figuring out who you are. I'd encourage you to watch that movie if you get a chance and really think about that question, who are you? As we move into point D, you need to discover who you truly are. I had 3 questions for you and then we'll close out. The first one is the person others see day in, day out, is that really who you truly are? What do you do in the morning before you go out in public? Boy, you clean up, poof the hair, okay? We shave up, guys, okay? Girls, you put on your makeup. Why do we do all that stuff? Because we have this image we're trying to project. This is who we really are. Not the person that looked in the mirror a couple hours ago, when I got out of bed. No, this is who I really am. And we project this image, hair, clothes, mask. And I don't mean the masks that protect us from pandemics. I mean the mask that we put on. The person we try to be that we're really not. The makeup, the change. Is this the person that you really are? Is that the person that people see day in, day out? Or if they could look on the inside, if they could do like God does and see our hearts, would they see a totally different person? Number 2, do you believe you are being the person God made you to be today? In the movie I just referred you to, Overcomer, the man who played the coach, actually he wrote the whole script, he directed it, and he starred in it. He was asked about the movie and why he wrote it. Here's what he said: our culture wants to say identity is what you feel, or what culture says about you, or some job status, or financial status. But all those things can change. So who you are, or who are you, when what you are known for is stripped away? When you're asked, who are you, and you give all these, well, I'm a teacher at the high school, or I'm a farmer rancher, whatever you say that you are, what if that's gone? Then who are you really as a person? Are you the person that God placed you here on this earth to be? Because He placed you here with a purpose, with a meaning. One more question. Would you let Jesus show you who you actually are? Are you brave enough to come to Jesus on bended knee and say, Lord, I don't believe I am being the person that you have called me to be. I need to make some changes in my life. Who are you? I want you to think about that as we sing our invitation song on bended knee. Am I willing to let Jesus change me?